Hello, Sagittarius, and welcome to June 2021. It is your monthly forecast, and there is so much going on, a lot of which in your seventh house. So we got to jump right into it. Mercury retrograde is already occurring in this house, and the seventh house is one of the four angular houses, meaning there's a lot of potency behind the angular houses. And for the seventh house, it has everything to do with I with another. It's the partnership house, it's the marriage house, it's the business collaborator house. It also, in addition to the ninth house, would be associated with lawsuits and things that very much involve the ways in which I am connected to another. So, with Mercury retrograde being in the seventh house, you could absolutely expect an ex or someone from that kind of respect, an ex best friend or an ex business partner, an ex lover, to circle back. Ghosts from our past come back around Mercury retrograde in order to confront us with the ways in which we need to rethink and reevaluate thinking and communicating and how we went about things that time, the ways in which we can evolve. Now, the big news is going to be the solar eclipse that occurs on June 10th, and that occurs in this house as well. This could be a makeup or a breakup transit. I just need to flag it without sugarcoating it. Of course, we don't use astrology to ever stoke fear or anxiety, but it is very much a time eclipses are associated with severing in order to catalyze new beginnings and major changes. So, for it to occur in the seventh house, it is pivotal that you are really evaluating during this time with Mercury retrograde being in the seventh house your partnerships, both from the romantic context, both from the best and also from the best friendship context. And if you have business partners, those as well, all of which would fall under the seventh house umbrella. With Mercury retrograde and with the eclipse being in the seventh house, just like I told people who have this in the ninth house, like I said, there is a sharing of lawsuits around lawsuits from a signification standpoint fall into the seventh and the ninth house. So I also want you to be really, really mindful around contracts. I want you to be really, really mindful if there is any sort of legal battle going on. You can expect major shifts and changes or momentum behind those at this time. This could be a time in which lawsuits come into the fold. So be very mindful about your actions and your behavior if that would ever be of concern. I don't know you. Essentially, is what I'm trying to say is that if that is of concern, there's a lot of potency around lawsuits being a thing. Outside of that, from the positive end of the spectrum, this eclipse could really catalyze and is potent for 6 months. It could catalyze new beginnings from the relationship standpoint. So that is something that you're seeking. You got a lot of activity in the seventh house now, and from the eclipse standpoint, it perpetuates into Sag season, actually, is when the next bout of eclipses will be, and the final bout of eclipses in the Gemini Sag axis. You have the Sun and Venus at different points in the month entering into your eighth house. And the eighth house are the ways in which we're merged with others, the ways in which we haven't individuated. The eighth house would rule things like therapy. It would rule things like debts to others, though all of the ways in which we're kind of enmeshed or merged or boundarylessness, there's vulnerability associated with the eighth house, which is a beautiful signification for the eighth house. All of which to say, Venus is considered from the Hellenistic lens to be the lesser benefic. The sun is always a spotlight where it is. So this could be a really good time to shed light on and work on your demons in general. The eighth house is one of the shadowy houses, but more specifically, the ways in which we struggle with boundaries or the ways in which you may want to work on individuating and being your own person. If you've been thinking about therapy, this could absolutely be the invitation to do so, especially with all the seventh house energy going on. Like this could really, it may be this is the first time that you've introduced a therapist and could be a good way to evolve when it comes to the one-on-one relationship dynamic. Maybe this isn't the first time. Maybe you already have a therapist. There's a lot of potency around big breakthroughs at this time. All in all, to say the Sun and Venus being co-present in the eighth house does spell well for the ways in which we're merged with others or the ways in which we want to work on our thoughts and patterns around that, to be honest with you. Now you have Mars and Leo entering the ninth house. So in addition to all that seventh house activity, you have Mars, which was considered the lesser malefic, being in the ninth house. And the ninth house is that other house associated with lawsuits and law in general. Once again, circling back to if this is a thing for you when it comes to lawsuits or even legal contracts, it is very important to note that there is a lot of sensitivity and a lot of potency around how you act at this time. So act wisely. If it's something like a legal contract for a home or something like that, that you can hire a specialist to review it, absolutely do so if it's within your budget. If not, if you have a friend who's like a double Virgo or someone who's super analytical, like that can look through with a fine tooth comb where you might be more big picture, this could, I would strongly recommend you do so. Now, Mars, from the high end or high vibe standpoint, associated with drive, ambition, assertion, and the ninth house has other significations like our belief systems and world travel. So those could be two things that you courageously tackle at this time, whether it's in vociferously reading new texts, especially from other cultures that you might want to incorporate into your belief system, or maybe you just want to hop on a plane to LAX with a dream in a cardigan, to quote Miley Cyrus, or wherever it may be. If it's a voyage, this is very much a voyaging transit. I would recommend for self-care going on some sort of excursion, even if it is local, but it would fall under the ninth house if it was like a hike or something, or if it was like going to the beach, for example. That would still, in my opinion, be a ninth house excursion, a change of terrain. Hop in your car and go for a drive, and just go for a drive. That could be a very potent form of self-care at this time, where you could do some real good reflection. Of course, pay attention to the road. More than anything, like I said, I would highlight that the big themes are partnership. More, would be number one, given that that's the highest or the most important seventh house signification, and you have Mercury retrograde and the eclipse happening in your seventh house. But then, given that Mars is in the ninth house, legal contracts or just lawsuits in general, also there's potency around that. And then thirdly, if you don't have a therapist, maybe it's a great time for one. If you do have a therapist, it's time to really get vulnerable with them. Wishing you the best of luck this month.